Hey everybody, Movie Man here, and today my friend and I want to talk to you about what I think is one of the top 5 sci-fi films of the 1950s and easily one of the top 20 science fiction films of all time, in my humble opinion. It is Invaders from Mars from 1953. We'll be back in a few moments to talk. Actually, you could just stand there and look pretty. I'll do the talking. I first saw this film in between my junior and senior years in high school during my summer break. I rented both this film and War of the Worlds, another one which I had not seen before. I watched War first and was really impressed by it. I enjoyed the story, I enjoyed the special effects. Then I watched Invaders the next day, and I was totally immersed and captivated by the story. If you haven't seen this film before, be warned, there are spoilers ahead. The film really works for several reasons. Brisk pacing, director William Cameron Menzies' sparse, minimalistic design, and a fine performance by young Jimmy Hunt as David in the lead role. Now, there isn't much to dissect on an intellectual scale, but it does explore some of the same themes that Invasion of the Body Snatchers does 3 years later. Namely trust, and the loss of those traits that make us human. This film really works well on those levels, even as we see it from the point of view of a child. The effect it has on us as the viewer depends on how well we immerse ourselves into the point of view of young David. Now, the plot of this film is straightforward and easy to follow. David is an amateur scientist, and he's woken one night to see a flying saucer landing in the huge field behind his house. He rushes into his parents' bedroom, wakes his parents up, and his father, a rocket engineer, goes out to investigate. As his father is walking along the back path, he suddenly vanishes from the screen. The next morning, David's mother phones the police to search for her husband, and as they're searching the hill behind the house, they go missing as well. Soon, David's father turns back up, and David notices an immediate change in him. He's no longer warm and loving towards David. He's very cold, and even at one point strikes David. The police also return and act in a similar fashion. All three of them have a blank, cold, emotionless face. David discovers all three have scars resembling an X on the back of their necks. David goes out to play and sees his friend Kathy walking along the back path behind his house, and he watches as she suddenly disappears. He rushes to tell her mother, only to have Kathy show up with the same blank, expressionless face her father and the police have. As David leaves, he notices that there's a smoke coming out of the basement and yells to the mother. The mother and a neighbor rushes out, and the neighbor says that there's a can of gas that's been spilled all over the basement. The mother turns to Kathy and says, "Were you playing in the basement?" And Kathy says, "No." David runs off. In the meantime, his father takes the mother on the back path to show her something. And we know what fate awaits her. All these disappearances have been marked by a pit opening in the sand, accompanied by an eerie a cappella soundtrack, and it's very effective. We don't see hands or tendrils or claws or anything coming out to grab these people. We get to see them vanish, and that's a great effect. David bursts into the police station seeking help. And for the first time, we get one of William Cameron Menzies' most striking set designs. The long white walls are blank except for a clock above the sergeant's desk. Now, adding to the surreal setting is that the clock hands never move. As the sergeant tries to calm David down, the chief emerges from his desk. He too has an X on his neck. David tries to run away but is locked away in a cell. The police chief tells the sergeant he will go out and find David's parents. The sergeant is kind of disturbed by David's behavior. So he phones a friend of his, Dr. Pat Blake, to come and talk with David. David tells her his story, which she finds credible, but at the same time rather incredible. As David is telling his story, his parents show up to take him away. Dr. Blake takes custody of David instead of releasing him to his parents. Dr. Blake takes David into her custody instead of releasing him to his parents. She and David visit Dr. Stuart Kelston, an astronomer who knows David, and the three try to figure out where these creatures have come from, finally deducing that they are from Mars. They also deduce that the reason that these Martians have arrived and have targeted David's father and the Wilson household is that Kathy's father is a physicist, and he and David's father are working on a rocket, and the Martians feel endangered by it and are trying to stop it. Now, up until now, the Martians have captured and converted David's parents, the two officers, Kathy Wilson, and the police chief. And they add to that General Mayberry, commander of the local military. Now we, along with David, Kelston, and Blake, watch as David's father leads General Mayberry along the back path, which we now know is the danger zone, and we watch the general disappear. A call is made to Colonel Fielding, second in command of the local military, and the military is mobilized. And for the next few minutes, we get scene after scene of the military loading up their tanks and their troops on their trains and getting ready to go fight the invaders. And there's a reason why we get this. Now, William Cameron Menzies is one of cinema's greatest production designers, and he turned his masterful eye to this film, creating a stark, empty look, which gives it a dreamlike feel and also helped kept production costs down. He ended up filling about a dozen notebooks with designs detailing every single set and scene, including scene numbers, camera movements, camera angles, and so on. And these notebooks were going to be his primary source in shooting the film. However, the night before production was to begin, the notebooks were lost. Neither Menzies nor script supervisor Mary Yerk knew where they were. Each thought the other had the notebooks. Now, Menzies was obviously very distraught at this, and it led to kind of some difficulties in production. The film ended up being much shorter than normally had planned, which is why we get minutes of the military preparing and moving out on trains, and it was there just to add some time to the running time. Now, these scenes are the weakest of the film, but luckily they go by enough where things get back on track as planned. No pun intended. So Colonel Fielding and his aide, Sergeant Rinaldi, arrive, and they meet with David, Kelston, and Blake to discuss what they've seen. We soon learn that little Kathy Wilson has died as a result of a brain hemorrhage. Dr. Blake finds this very unusual for such a young girl, so she rushes off to the hospital to examine her. Sergeant Rinaldi, who's always, quote, sticking his neck out, unquote, goes to the sandpit to investigate, and, you guessed it, he's taken by the Martians. Fielding, angry over what happened to his aide, exclaims, "If it's a fight they want, it's a fight they'll get." Dr. Blake arrives back and explains that the little X on the back of Kathy's neck is attached to a little globe, and that when the Martians send a signal, the globe explodes, killing the person. Naturally, Dave is upset by this, knowing that the same fate could await his parents. As the army arrives, Fielding is told that the plant nearby has been blown up. The two policemen that were abducted earlier in the movie blow it up, and while they try to escape, suddenly drop dead. They too the result of the exploding globe. Next, we see General Mayberry and the police chief carrying two large cases containing nitroglycerin, trying to sneak into the area where the rocket is kept, but they're shot by a couple of MPs and they explode. Next, we go to the lab where Dr. Wilson works. The lab resembles the police station with its long walls and open spaces, and a shot in a deep focus that, with Wilson in the foreground and his assistant in the background, and both are kept in the frame so clear, it's just very effective. The assistant is offering his condolences, while Wilson sort of remains static and appears unmoved. But he's probably so disturbed by what happened, by the loss of his daughter, the fact that his house burned down, that he feels empty inside, which matches the emptiness of his lab. Outside the lab, David's parents arrive with the goal of killing Wilson, which they just miss out on. During their escape, they crash off the side of the road, but are apprehended and taken to the hospital. Dr. Blake takes David aside to relay this information to him, and suddenly they vanish beneath the sand. Now, between the time of David's vanishing and the Wilson's near assassination, the Army has developed a tool to help them both block the Martian signals that kill their human victims, but that can also help them locate where exactly below the ground the Martian craft is. As the Army searches above the ground, below the ground we finally see the Martians, as David and Dr. Blake are brought before the Martian control, which is a gold head with gold tentacles which kind of wave uncontrollably inside a glass orb. It certainly cuts a memorable image, one of the most iconic of all of sci-fi cinema. The lead Martian never speaks. It sends its commands by moving its eyes. In addition to the lead Martian, there are two giant Martians in green bodysuits and bulging eyes, along with Sergeant Rinaldi, now under their control. Rinaldi is commanded to take David away after David angrily bangs on the glass containing the Martian head, while Dr. Blake is placed on a glass table after being hit by a hypnotic beam. We see a device being lowered down that will soon implant her. The Army finally finds where the Martian ship is located and blasts a hole in the ground and begin their search. They arrive just in time to save Dr. Blake and plant charges to blow up the ship. Their escape topside is hindered by a parade of Martians rushing back and forth between the tunnels. Incidentally, those bubbles in the tunnels were actually made with inflated condoms, just in case you ever want to drop that little tidbit at a party. Anyway, the soldiers come upon David and Rinaldi, but are sealed off until David picks up one of the alien heat guns, which were used to seal off the tunnel to begin with, and he manages to blow a hole, allowing them to escape. As they all go running for cover before the ship explodes, we focus on David running, and we get a montage of the events of the film superimposed over his face, along with another eerie musical accompaniment. David seems to be running in place, and his face has a frightened image. Soon another image comes superimposed over David's face, that of him in bed, stirring from a nightmare. He rushes into his parents' bedroom and they help him realize it's all been just a bad dream. David returns to bed, but is soon awakened by a humming sound. He looks out his window and sees a saucer landing in the field behind his house. The end. As I said, I ranked this film in the top 5 of all of 50 sci-fi cinema, along with Forbidden Planet, War of the Worlds, Day the Earth Stood Still, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Now, some might want to include The Thing in this, but I'm not really a fan. The film works on so many levels, and it's really because of Menzies' direction. The dream ending is not at all a cop-out. It is really, to me, one of the most effective tools in the movie. And in England, it worked a little too effectively. It upset audiences so badly that Menzies had to go back and film a new ending. We lose the montage, and instead David reaches safety, and Dr. Blake and Kelston are seen putting him to bed, telling him that his parents will be okay. Also in the UK version, additional scenes involving David, Kelston, and Blake were filmed at the observatory discussing the Martians. Now these scenes were shot almost a year later, and it really shows. Jimmy Hunt, who plays David, looks a lot older, and the outfit he wears doesn't really match that of what he wore in the prior version. Now, this padded scene doesn't really add much to the movie overall. It just kind of increased its running time. Now, yes, I'm a fan of this movie, and maybe I'm a little biased towards it, which is why I rank it so high. But I think it really works. Yes, there are certain things that, as we're watching the movie, don't make sense. And yes, when we see the dream ending, we kind of go, oh, okay. Like, for instance, how does David know how to use the Martian's heat gun? Okay, since it's a dream, that makes sense. But the scenes that I think are most surreal and dreamlike, including the police station with its white empty walls, the field behind the house, which we only ever see a broken fence, and it just works. And I think what also works is that we get sucked in. We become David. We don't realize that this is a nightmare. It is technically a nightmare. It's David's nightmare. But it also is a nightmare situation. Imagine the people that we love and trust are suddenly different. Our parents, who we go to for nurturing and comfort, are suddenly cold. The police department, who we seek for help, are also sort of in on this. So, as I said earlier, this reminds me a lot of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, because it plays upon the themes of trust and loss of humanity. And what's curious is that Invasion of the Body Snatchers originally had a different ending as well. But since that original ending upset audiences, it had to be reshot. Like this original ending upset audiences in the UK and had to be reshot. It's worth checking out. And like I said, I think it's a top 5 of the 50s, and I think it's one of the top of all time. The music, the art direction, the set direction, the cast is great. Jimmy Hunt is fantastic in the lead role. Arthur Franz, who appeared in basically every other 50s science fiction film, appears in this one as Dr. Kelston. Helena Carter is fantastic as Dr. Blake. Incidentally, Leif Erikson, who plays David's father in this movie, he and Jimmy Hunt also played father and son in a film 5 years earlier, Sorry, Wrong Number, starring Barbara Stanwyck. Another little tidbit if you want to drop at a party. Erikson is good in this as well. And of course, any film that includes Morris Ankrum can't be all bad. He is one of my all-time favorite character actors, regardless of genre. And he, like Franz, appeared in basically every other science fiction film of the 50s. He's really good in this. He's basically solid in everything he does. So that's it. That's Invaders from Mars. I am the movie man. I urge you to check this out. And I urge you to continue to come back and watch the videos that I post. Leave appropriate comments, please. And that's it. Enjoy the movies.